Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who likes to wear one of his socks extra tight.
Tim Longo. Is that a reference to my...
That's a reference to your wilderness predicament.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it wasn't extra tight by choice. Just a swollen leg. Yeah. Wilderness.
It's like an Oregon Trail sort of thing that would have happened.
It was absolutely an Oregon Trail situation. You're totally right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it
you
was
had
my
the
own
encounter
personal...
table, you got stinging fly, and Grandpa got a busted leg.
Dysentery. Yeah, it wasn't dysentery per se, but it was gross. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, I'm back from my trip. You're back from your trip.
Yes, thanks to those who listened to the Ken Levine interview again. I ran that last week from Ireland.
Yes, thank you for letting us take a week off and do the things we were doing and have adventures.
I referenced Oregon Trail there, but of course that's really kind of a precursor to what we've been playing in XCOM. I bet it works much the same way. Table lookups, and there's just kind of a much greater level of complexity.
Right.
And one of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight was sort of plans of attack, and how you have sort of changed your plan of attack based on our initial sessions. And how mine is different.
Yeah. I didn't start over, but I did kind of take a little bit of a step back with an older save, and what I decided to do, because I feel like I was kind of maybe expanding and broadening too quickly, or I feared that's what I was heading toward for what I needed to do to kind of like be ready for what they were going to throw at me, Because that first, my very, very first game that I failed very quickly, I think I did that to the extreme, and then got the end state and the failure cinematic and all that stuff. So this time I kind of took a step back, and what I've been doing is expanding and researching in a very focused way. So I'm in March, but I still only have one base, and what I've been doing is building that base up to, spending all my money on that one base. And really building it up so it's really robust. So I have like 2 or 3 versions of each building you can build. And then all of my research, I've been focusing in a couple certain areas, and you're way ahead of me on the research, but like getting armor quickly, and then getting, plasma, and just putting all my eggs into those baskets, and then just kind of churning them out quickly rather than, again, spreading myself too thin. So it means I'm going more slowly. But the other kind of interesting thing that will, that I think we want to talk about today too, related to some of that, and I want to hear what you've been doing, is just the way the game seems to be dynamically reacting to how I'm playing. But let's get to that. I mean, what have you been doing? Like you're much farther than I am.
Yes, I'm in June now, so I've been almost 6 months. I almost made it to our target for last week or 2 weeks ago. And I have a main base in North America, a second base in Central Asia, and a third base in Northern Africa.
Oh, okay. So you're 3.
Right. So and those satellite bases basically are interceptors and radar dishes currently. They just give me a little bit more offensive capability. They also provide a little bit more research and or manufacturing, because you can move things between bases as well.
Oh, right,
so right. Made something. So it gives me a little bit without having to... I basically tried to build each of those satellite bases to have more of a focus. Okay, I'm going to try to do some more science here, some more manufacturing over here. I assume they all share data. Seems that way. And I haven't necessarily found that the game is reacting to that necessarily, though I did towards the end of May have a point at which there were 4 UFOs flying around the Earth.
Oh, wow.
A couple of them were large or very large, and I had difficulty taking them down at all. And then two that were, one was medium and one was small or extra small. I don't recall which. So I had a lot of these. I had a lot of UFOs in the air, and I've lost an interceptor since. One of my original interceptors is gone.
Did you have to upgrade your interceptors somehow to deal with them?
I have not upgraded them other than to add the best type of missile, I think, which is the avalanche missile. But even that wasn't sufficient. You can't carry a lot of those missiles, and so I didn't get that far with them. You have basically 3 on each side. And what happened with the interceptor that went down is it ran out of ammo, and by the time I disengaged, it was too late.
Oh, right.
So,
wow.
Yeah, it's been quite a battle. I have been still building up that main base, and there's more stores and space for living quarters and things like that. And it has 3 radar dishes, 3 small ones. So I'm covering a lot of the globe. I did have 1 month in which some place was not happy with me and withdrew a lot of funding. But then the next month, it was made up for tenfold by the rest of the world. And that happened again this month. So I've been doing pretty well financially, although building those new bases were pretty costly, especially having to put an interceptor in each. I mean, that was a big chunk of change. Those are like 600,000 or something like that. So it has been interesting as far as that goes. And my other strategy has been to try to leave no man behind. I rarely let soldiers die, which probably take us to another discussion, which is that of saves coming.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come back to that because you had a follow-up question.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm just wondering how. Yeah, I mean, just that macro topic, like I mentioned, of just how the game is reacting to how you build. Because what I'm finding with my focus, and I'm only 3 months in, but I feel like either it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't know what's happening on the rest of the globe, but it seems like it's still appropriately scaled to what I should be doing right now. You know what I mean?
It felt that way to me too.
Okay. So that's
until I got to May, and that's when everything just.
So
broke loose.
Do you send your troops from the main base? Like if you shoot down something in Africa, do you send your troops from your main base? I only have a Sky
Ranger. Yes, I send that all over the world. That's my.
Oh, okay. So they have enough fuel and stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to start leaning toward trying to leave no man behind too, because I'm getting better at the ground battles, I think. So I feel like I can actually achieve that with now that I think we've figured out opportunity fire, and our theory ended up being true. That it was like, yep, you need to reserve.
You need to reserve that space. Yes, we had some email about that. We'll get to that.
Okay, yeah, we're just idiots, but read the fine print kind of stuff.
Well, the other way to do that would be to steal it from the next round.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I've had times when if I set up a good crossfire with opportunity fire left, like there'll be times when they get like 3 snapshots off. You know what I mean? And I'm not doing anything. It's just these 2 guys have this alien pinned down, and that aliens, there's nothing they can do, And it just... And it a little bit on autopilot. Yeah, you can take it from the next one, but you're a little bit more. The onus is a little bit more on you. I don't know. Yes, it feels. I know it's not free, but it feels free.
Right. No, I started using that button, those buttons, the red buttons around movement to reserve.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I'm almost always use the snapshot, I guess it's called, which is
you just don't get enough. Yeah,
exactly. You don't have enough time units, and I believe that the time units are scaled based on percentages of your total time units anyway. The rest of the time for any given weapon. So the fact that you're getting more time units isn't necessarily helping because you're still only going to get 3 or 4 shots and only 1 accurate shot, and etc. So, or 2, I guess, if you had something in your sights from the very beginning. So it's kind of interesting that way. It's weird that it scales that way. You get to move around a lot more if you want, as your soldiers gain in experience. But you don't.
Their stats grow?
Well, they get more time units.
Oh, okay.
Their stats grow. They get more time units. They're better shots and things like that. But the biggest thing is they get more time units. But as far as I can tell, the actual amount of time units it takes to take a shot scales with their time units.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So that they're never going to get 10 shots or whatever, no matter how. If they were a general, they wouldn't get 10 shots. They'd still get 4 or whatever slap shots. So it feels like, and that may be a little bit not entirely accurate, but it certainly feels that way. And I've only had one soldier get to captain so far. I have a handful of sergeants and then a few squaddies.
Yeah, I have one. I have the same right now. Yeah, I have one captain and I think 3 sergeants. The manual seems to, it kind of calls out the ranks based on kind of numbers of subordinates. You know what I mean? Like I think you can't have a captain until you have a certain number of sergeants below, and then you know what I mean. Like it's part of a whole tree, and so I think the colonel or whatever the top one is, like you don't get until you have a certain number of total units or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's how the manual talks about it. So it's a little hierarchical thing. So that's why you need to keep them alive and have people in each level or each strata, right. So you have the full each hierarchy, rank. I guess. So each rank, so you can have the full ranking tree to support each other. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, just the layers. Like, talk about a game about an onion layer mentality. Like, this game's layers are just crazy, and all the stuff you've been finding that you've been telling me about, is blowing my mind. Of like, oh my gosh.
Yes, this was another topic you had brought up, is that this is a game that's going to be difficult to master. We're going to play through basically once.
Yeah. But
we will not come out of this in any way XCOM masters of any kind. We will be still neophytes. We'll know a little bit more. We'll be slightly more grizzled veterans, but we're not going to come out of this and know how to beat it out of the gate every time. I'm still at a point where I was texting with Tim over the weekend that I was really worried I was not going to make it through May, just because the difficulty level had suddenly really spiked for me.
Yeah.
I had all these UFOs in the air, and they were difficult to take down. And in fact, one of those large ones, and we can get to this in a moment, but one of those large ones, I didn't actually take it down. I just waited for it to land and sent an interceptor, sent my ranger there immediately, and just tackled it on the ground. And then had really I really enjoyed that experience, because that exposed some new rules to me that I hadn't quite understood prior to that.
Yeah.
It has been quite an interesting. That was probably my favorite mission so far. I was actually up to that point through March and April, and even at the beginning of May, starting to feel like, well, it's starting to feel a little grindy. I was having repeated terror attacks. I had one in Lagos. I had another one in Rome. I had one somewhere in the States. I can't remember where. But I basically had a few of those, and I had a few down ships. And I was like, I'm kind of feeling like I've got a handle on this. And then suddenly in May, it was like
ratcheted up.
I have no idea how to handle all of this. Suddenly, all my plates are spinning, and I only have the one landing crew. And if people are wounded, then you don't have them to send out the next time, right? And so you have to manage that. And I didn't have lots of depth in the soldiers because I only had so much living space. It's just et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And I started feeling that real pressure and squeeze that a sim will put on you.
Yeah. But that's the terrifying thing. It kind of goes to that back to that macro topic of like the tuning and balancing and algorithms and such that they're building into this to somehow dynamically scale based on how you are playing, and still have it be rewarding. I mean, that's kind of the challenge of a sim. You don't want it to be so punishing that they stop playing. You want them to finish, right? You want them to keep playing, but you definitely can get yourself into a situation where you won't be able to finish. And this game seems like a good example of that. And I feel like modern sims just have gotten better and better at that, finding that right balance. But
right, and I mean the reason why I think is the following. I think at this time, the way that you would design, you keep saying algorithms, and I'm thinking it's probably just a table. And I think it's a table that works more or less in the following way.
It's because I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't.
Right.
Know. I use algorithms for various
terms. Table's an algorithm. You roll over, you generate a random number, you look at an entry in the table, right? That's okay. That's an algorithm. But the more algorithmic part of that is that I think it's probably a very long table, say 100 entries. And at the beginning of the game, you're rolling a D6 or a D10 or whatever from 1 to 10. And you're getting those entries in that table. And as time goes on, I bet that window is just sliding down. So after you've had a couple of encounters, now you're looking at 3 to 12. And maybe 11 and 12 are a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
And as that window slides further and further, now there are other things that will change. Maybe there's a frequency, and that also ratchets up.
Well, and then if
you play a board game like Pandemic, you can see the same sorts of systems in play in very simple ways, by moving simple sliders on a few different axes. When this happens, turn over 3 cards instead of 2 cards, and if this happens, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So you have these different ways that generate fairly complex looking behavior from actually very simple inputs. And I don't think there's necessarily a lot of complexity. I don't think there's necessarily tons of depth in the sim in terms of the encounters. I think it's more, wait this many days, some random number of days.
Yeah, that's kind of
that number shortens and things like that. I think those are probably
curiosity.
Right. That would be if I were doing this myself back in the Apple II days. That's what we would have had the memory to do, I believe.
So you don't think that they're taking into account how many bases you have, how many squad members you have, what rankings they have, what you've researched?
I mean, you could factor that into the equation of what you do with the random number. For example, if I'm rolling a D10 and looking at starting at index whatever. Well, if the person has 3 bases, I add 2. You could do things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but my worry is that if they're not taking some of that, I mean, it just makes me more anxious because if they're not taking some of that stuff into account, then I feel like it's going to be very easy to get yourself into a corner where you're just going to lose, and that the balance is not going to be, the percentage of times that the balance is going to be off based on how you're building yourself up and what the random number generator gives you is much higher it's much more likely to be out of whack.
Right. Well, what I would say about that is I would say that's how a simulation makes an argument. And for example, in SimCity is well known to be something that is basically arguing in favor of public transit, for example, just to pick one thing. Yeah. And the way it makes that argument is by making it a fact that the more roads you build, the more traffic you have. And the traffic outstrips the road building. There's a curve, like there's a formula for how much traffic you'll have. And the more roads you lay down, the worse the traffic will be by orders of magnitude. Yeah. And I would say that that's how that simulation is making its argument. And it is based on some real studies and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really matter. But
SimCity doesn't have as much RNG going on, right? I mean, it's based on what...
There are a lot more formulas.
The direct input that the way you are building, they have made conclusions about.
Right. I would say that's more of a... I would say that's more of a pure sim.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And it's also more of a sim where everything is visible to you.
Yeah, right.
And it's a different sort of thing. You're meant to understand everything. It's meant to be like a board game with no hidden information, that you literally can see everything. There's very little randomness, and it's in your strategy and how you deal with it.
Yeah. And Civ,
but here, I think you want that anxiety to not know.
Yeah, and I agree.
And so more randomness.
That drama is really valuable to why people love the game, I think, right? And the stories, and I have a couple that are just hilarious that I want to tell later, anecdotes that definitely makes the game shine, but it doesn't remove my anxiety where the RNG is has so much more of an impact on how things will go. And I think the trick, and that's why I'm excited to play the modern version to see how they modernized it. The trick, though, is to just be on that razor's edge of it not feeling unfair when something goes wrong. You know what I mean? Like you need to be able to recover. Like the argument that with your point about like what argument is it as a sim trying to make, like you're kind of saying that it's like fighting aliens is rough. And
right. Well, no, I think it's more than that. I mean, it's possible that I will end up overstretched, in which case the approach I'm taking is counter to the argument it's making. And it might be the case that you're okay or that you're in trouble and you're not being aggressive enough. And so the argument then that the sim would be making is if I'm right, that you have to battle aliens as aggressively as you can and set up fallbacks, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas with you being more methodical and kind of turtling in that one base, you're trying to be slow and methodical and not take risks. And that's a different argument. And yes, there's a lot of anxiety for both of us not knowing which of us is going to come out the other side. If either of us, right? I mean, I have no idea, right? I haven't ever played this and neither of you. So we're in a position where we don't know what argument the game's making. However, in either case, the anxiety is a key part of that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why that's what I love about the game so far too. I think, I mean, I guess it's silly to say it, but I think a lot of what I'm saying is really just has to do with the lack of telegraphing of what's going on, that a modern game would do a better job at to some degree. Because a modern game, I think,
would do a much better job of actually balancing that difficulty, especially when we consider we're both playing on the easiest level of difficulty.
We're not in the business, and I don't think we should be anymore, with a few exceptions, but I still think there's telegraphing going on, better telegraphing of. I don't want to say, I'm kind of digging myself a hole because I don't agree with myself on some of this, but like, punishing the player for things they don't know about, you know what I mean? And kind of wasting their time, right? Because it's so trial and error is the only way that you can surface some of what the sim is actually doing. And to your point, I think you made an excellent point on like the two extremes. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle, right, of how you should play. And to find that middle ground, you have to play a lot and you have to probably fail a lot because it's going to be really interesting to see where the two of us end up, because I just might go so slow and steady that the Earth just gets taken over or something, right, because I just haven't expanded quickly enough. But I don't know. It's just it's a fascinating problem. That is a whole different balancing challenge for a developer that we just haven't talked about yet because we haven't had a game that has gone this simulation centric. And to your point about Sim City or Civilization, that also has fairly surfaced and clear equations going on, if you will. Right. It's like this number of units at this town plus this number of attacking units. There's still a little bit of RNG there, but you have a better chance of winning, right? You can see them, where they're headed. Like there's, SimCity's even more so. But the XCOM style games, it's interesting to hear some of the Mario Rabbids stuff coming out now with that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's something about that I want to talk about at some point.
These games are, like just even in the shots, right? Like the RNG in if an alien hits you or not, or you hit them, right? There's drama in watching that bolt fly across the screen to see what happens, and you're just like clenching up and you're like, oh, is it going to hit? Is it going to hit? And then when it hits, but you have no very little control over that other than picking which guy is shooting. And
I feel like it goes too far.
Yeah, I do too.
The Mario versus Rabbids analogy is an interesting one because what I understand from that is you have a 0, 50, or 100% chance of hitting.
Yeah, it's very clear. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And that is an innovation that I wish came along a lot sooner because the problem is it makes it almost impossible to plan because you have a 98% chance of hitting. Well, okay, how much do you really want to plan around the 2% chance of failure? But you should, if you're a good strategist, you should have a fallback position for if that 2%. And at that point, the chess game just becomes so explosively large a space. How much effort you think about every possible step of failure. As abstracting pattern matching people, right? We want to go into something saying, and this is something Sid Meier's talked about in terms of Civ, we want to go in thinking, okay, anything over 80% is going to happen, or whatever that number is.
Yeah.
And because of our naive, we talked about statistics on a prior episode of our naive sort of human understanding of stats.
Yeah, right.
Which are wrong in terms of what the math actually says.
It's all perception based, right? You want to feel that you want the drama they discovered in this game that created a genre and sounds like has been carried forward in the modern versions, but just modernized and improved. You want that drama there. You want that sort of that clenching moment, but you don't want it to. You don't want it to feel unfair. You want you want some losses, and you want to you want to lose a couple guys here and there, but you kind of want to just squeak through. You
want the story, right?
But you want to be the hero, right? You want to win.
That's what I mean. Yes, so, you want to have what's his name, Randy? Oh man, now I'm blanking his name. Randy Quaid flying his plane right up into the center of the ship at the end, right? I mean, you want that moment where you have this amazing success. You want that, what they call fiero in, I think that's Huizinga, right? You want that moment of just, yes, it all came together.
Yeah.
And with one roll of the die, it could just be like, oh, we all died and Earth is enslaved.
Yeah.
And that's just such a knife edge.
It's a funny, I'll use it as
too much.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably it's cool. I really can't wait to talk to a guest about it, but it feels like even though it's punishing, it feels like kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but like an authentic simulation of what it's trying to do. It feels like if I take the emotion out of it for a second and the sergeant that I just lost or whatever, it's like, yeah, this is war. I mean, against aliens, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, so, but it's still a video game. So it's like they've achieved something cool with the sort of purity of it, but it's also like, it's got to be the usability of it has to be appropriate for a entertainment product. And I think the other thing that we talk a lot about that is contributing to my anxiety is just the pace at which we play and the amount of time we have to play. Like, this is a 100-hour kind of game, right? Like,
yeah, it does feel that way.
To really like sink your teeth into it, and I'm sure it's delicious when you do. Like, you need to spend a lot of time on it, and and I haven't had enough time, but I can see it there. But I'll use the segue to some of that to this topic, to a couple of my anecdotes, because I want to know. I don't know if you've experienced this yet or not, but I want to know if some of the stats that our soldiers have with like morale and different like berserk mode and fear mode and those things they can pop into. Have you seen any of the aliens do the same thing? Do you think that I
have not.
Because I had this last ground battle that I had two aliens, and they're the weakest ones as sectoids or whatever. Yeah. The last two ground missions, the last one alive seemed to freak out because he was the last, and I had the ship surrounded and he was outside of the ship, so he couldn't get back into the ship. And so one of them, this is my headcanon version. I don't know if this is actually happening, but this is how I perceived it. He took a grenade and ran to my Sky Ranger. It looked like he was going to run inside and or throw the grenade inside. I shot him on the way and he blew up. but he was like right down my ramp, like right at the bottom of my ramp. And luckily the explosion didn't get in the Sky Ranger, but he was the last dude alive and he was running. So I just have this story in my head where his morale had basically gone to crap and he had this one grenade and he's like, I'm going to get you guys.
He was the Randy Quaid of his species.
He was. And he actually had to run across almost the whole map to get there. So I was like, where is this guy going?
That's amazing.
I had him surrounded. And then the other one was I had this other guy surrounded near some like barn type buildings. And he had a grenade out as well. And I saw it in his hand. But I had him such surrounded where he was kind of like he would try to come around the corner and then see us and then he'd run back. And then he'd try again the next turn. And he kind of kept trying to find an angle on maybe the AI was just kind of in a confused state. But he already had primed his grenade. So he ran back and forth like 3 times and then just blew up.
Right. And so that is one of the things I think you can do with this game. And I haven't quite figured out all the parameters around how the aliens will behave. But I do think they have a consistent behavior, much like one of the ghosts in Pac-Man, and have a specific set of rules. You can take advantage of it. What I suspect happened was, when you surrounded a sectoid, it probably primed a grenade in order to throw it at a bunch of people. I have noticed they will throw grenades or use grenades when there are bunched up soldiers. So that's an input. But also it probably found the one direction to run where there weren't lots of soldiers and it wasn't exposed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those rules combined to make an interesting story.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there was a story.
No, right, and that's I think that's the beauty of
that's the genius of simple rules like that. It's very similar to the simple rules that generate flocking or herding or schooling behavior, in fish and birds and things like that. Very simple, very, very simple rules can generate very complex behavior that you can tell a story about. And I think that that's probably what's going on here. I've definitely started to take advantage of I ran into an alien type later on called I think a chrysalid.
Yeah, that's the one that everyone always says is like
it is
the
bad.
Worst.
It is bad and scary and I hate it. However,
I don't know if you saw that tweet that Clint sent me. It's like, oh, wait till you meet it. What do they call it?
A chrysalid.
Chrysalid. Yes. He's like, yeah, you haven't seen fear until you see a chrysalid.
Yeah, the chrysalids definitely taught me a big lesson. They invaded somewhere. I can't remember where they invaded, and they were chrysalids, but it was very recent. That might have been Lagos.
Why are they so... Well, maybe I should not. Maybe I should...
I'm not going to tell you why.
Okay, all right.
But I will say that, because you should experience that particular fun anxiety for yourself, but I will say that I was able to determine within the space of a single mission what their rules were in terms of where they will move to, and use that to my advantage. And I had to change my strategy in terms of how I deployed my soldiers in order to take them down. And that was the first time that I really had to do that, where I really had to change my strategy altogether in terms of how I used my time units with any individual soldier very carefully, in a way that I really hadn't felt like I had to before. And part of that might be the level of difficulty. Maybe we are just not getting hit as much as we would have been and things like that. But this was the first time encountering them that I was like, oh, I need to end a turn in this way in order to tackle these safely.
Oh, and interesting. Yeah.
It was the sort of thing where I understood the rule of how they behaved. One rule anyway, maybe not all of their rules, but I picked up on something and understood, oh, okay, I get that and I can work with that. And that was a really thrilling moment, because it was a player moment and not a lore moment. They didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just figured that out.
That's cool. Yeah. It's nice to know that there's some orthogonal enemy design coming my way, because I feel like so far, because I've been so methodical, I think the encounters they're throwing at me are are not that diverse, with a few exceptions of like the Terror with the Reaper and stuff. But even the Reapers, like I think I just overreact to them and like lock them down quickly and just shoot rocket launchers at them, so
Sure.
like I've actually never had much trouble with them because I freak out and I'm like, oh, you're going down first,
Right. And that's because you use the rocket launchers, which I do not.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they're a blessing and a curse.
Yes. I would imagine.
But they're definitely effective in terror battles because there's a lot more aliens and you can just, I mean, you end up blowing a building sometimes and maybe a pedestrian or two, but
oh well.
Yeah, well.
Gotta break a few eggs.
So yep, you get one for the many. Yeah, those city battles are pretty. Those are pretty cool. Like I still love the game. It's it's just I think I'm just plagued by a modern version of this would be so sweet, and I just haven't played the modern version yet. So, which it's a big big.
I think
one on my.
Obviously we're going to have to play a bit. Of Enemy Unknown in order to just to see. I mean, we won't be able to play a full
some closure
campaign, but it will be really nice to explore that and see how that's gone and been modernized.
And the Mario and Rabbids stuff that again haven't played that, but just listening to people on other podcasts talking about it, it does sound like a great distillation of this genre, and multiple people have said, yeah, just like XCOM, like I just always couldn't break through, just never stuck to it and bounced off of it, etc. And just too punishing. And then this is just perfect. It's like, as usual, it takes Mario to take a genre, and of course it's, Ubisoft. So I know it's not all on Nintendo, but I'm sure
it's really the Rabbids, I think is what you're
the Rabbids made it. Yeah, right. They're the linchpin that we needed this whole time for XCOM style games. Of course.
No, I do think the big innovation there really is the coin flip.
Yeah.
The 0, 50, or 100.
Well, it's very clear because the percentages come from cover, it sounds like, right? So it's like you're in cover, it's 50%. But
I do think that those rules, there are rules like that are underlying the simulation in terms of the enemy behavior. And that's what, if you start to pick up on those, you can exploit that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Which is very common of AI of this time, that there are exploits. Everyone can talk about a game that they played in the 90s and, for this one enemy, if you just find a corner, they can't path to you or whatever. I mean, whatever the exploit is, there's always some exploit. And I don't think that I don't feel like the things that I've been doing are exploits. And actually, I think that makes it even more interesting. I feel it's genuinely, I've picked up on what their behavior is, and I can work with that. And that's just for me, that was just a thrilling moment. And it wasn't as a programmer or anything like that. It was just, I see the behavior this thing has. This is what I need to do. And I felt empowered. It was maybe the first time playing the game I felt empowered. Which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, because my encounters have been, fairly mild, I think, in the types of enemies they've been throwing at me. I've had a couple moments when having a really good crossfire set up with opportunity fire time units reserved, and just like having them kind of not necessarily like fall right into my trap, but feeling that way, where it's like there's nothing they can do. They're gonna die, and just because of the way I approached things. But I know I'm still in the little leagues right now. But
you'll get there.
I'll get there.
You'll make it to the show, Tim. All right. What do you say we take a quick break and then come back? We have some emails and such.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We have some feedback. One of the things that I know sometimes we just strike a chord with the audience and they have lots of stories and or questions and or thoughts. And XCOM is one of those games. We got a lot with Super Mario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We got quite a few actually with Final Fantasy IX last year. There are times when we really get them. And this is another one of those games that has really brought out the questions and some very thoughtful questions in email. And before we go on to that, send those to devgameclub@gmail.com. As you can tell, we read them and we love hearing from you. So you have the first one, sir.
So this is from Dan Hunter, a friend of the cast, who's written in before. Subject is XCOM UFO, and question, greetings from Guernsey. Is that how you say that?
Guernsey.
Guernsey. Again, I had to put fingers to keyboard to commend you on your choice for UFO XCOM as a topic for the new game in Dev Game Club. I have fond memories of purchasing the game back in the day. I came across a bulky, heavy box in the bargain bin of my local PC store. The packaging weighed a ton due to the size of the manual within. In the glory days of Agent Smolder and Scully, good to know you're a fan. I'm a big X-Files fan myself. References to aliens, a big manual, and a cheap price were enough to part this fool with his money. When I installed and played the game, I was overjoyed to find out that it was the spiritual sequel to Julian Gallup's Rebel Star Raiders and Laser Squad. Laser Squad games, which I was a huge fan of back in the 8-bit days when I played them on my 48K Spectrum. The game captured the epic scope of trying to repel a worldwide alien invasion, and I recall it being a hard bastard to crack. No game came this close to delivering a turn-based strategy game where you felt you were continually on the edge of failure and that the freedom of the planet could be lost due to alien opportunity fire. I personally don't believe that the two sequels, Terror from the Deep and XCOM Armageddon, came close to matching the greatness of the original. I grieve for my troops, who I spent time naming, who were struck down and sacrificed themselves for the freedom of the planet. When my students tell me that Dark Souls is hard, I tell them to log on to GOG and take a crack at the original XCOM. I agree. I'm sure there'll be a discussion at the end of the playthrough in light of the recent Firaxis remake and its sequel. I would like to ask for your thoughts on a topic that has come up in our classes. In light of the players streaming games via platform like Switch, has this trend, streaming gameplay, altered or affected games development? Keep up the good work. Dan Hunter, lecturer in ICT at Guernsey College of FE. I don't know what those acronyms mean. P.S. I get a kick out of...
That's the Fredonia Empire?
Oh,
no,
okay.
It's not really the Fredonia Empire.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
All right. Good job. You want me to do the P.S.s now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. P.S. I get a kick out of the fact that Americans can call lecturers at college professor. Okay. And P.P.S. I, too, am awaiting the rights issue to be resolved so we can play an optimized version of Excellent No One Lives Forever, but I will dig out my original CDs and see if I can get them working in the meantime. Although this recent post from the Rock Paper Shotguns informed us that of one method that could be legally gray reality. So there's a
link here that... I believe showed you where you could maybe download it. This is on Rock Paper Shotgun originally. So
because the rights
because the rights are such in question, and it's not possible to purchase. It has reached the gray area where actually I played the original Warcraft in the same way. So because it was not possible to get it in any way when we played that last year. So a couple things. One is, although I don't name my troops, do you name your troops?
No, and I thought you could. I had planned to, and then I thought you could.
You can. But I believe you can click on them and enter their names on the roster somewhere.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll do that.
There's a way to. I believe there is a way to do it. However, I do come up with stories for them.
Yeah, right.
So I have a couple who I think of as my French separatists who have joined up with XCOM. They're this couple, Sylvia, and the other one, I can't remember them. It's like Peter or Pierre. but I think of them as having come from Quebec. And then I have the German woman, Uda, who always has the heavy weapon that you start with at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And I have all these stories about each of them. And, of course, my Maria Reynolds is my captain. And I think of her as basically the Emily Blunt character from Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah,
So
that's cool.
She's just that tough.
Yeah, it's a good character. Yeah, I don't know if this is the case, but most of the names of my characters are Eastern European names of different kind of ethnicities, and that's where my base is. So I've just kind of made up a headcanon that, you know, somehow the game knows that, which it probably doesn't, because I have you know, more American sounding names or Western names in some of them as well. But a lot of my sergeants and my captain are all, you know, Eastern Europeans. So I think I'll just keep them there.
Again, I think it's possible to like put a dart in the middle of this big table and say, oh, okay, if they place it in Europe, put the dart here. I think you could do a lot with that sort of sliding window of where your random stuff comes from.
Yeah.
Anyway, the question as far as whether Twitch has altered or affected games development, certainly it has. I think that if you're a savvy developer, you're looking for games often. Not everybody does this, but you are looking for games that will stream well. I think PUBG is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is a classic example of something that has, I don't know if it was designed with streaming in mind, but it certainly feels like it was.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a game that really, really lends itself to streaming. I think some games got lucky that streaming was coming up at the same time. I think Minecraft owes a lot of its success, and not taking anything away from the game because it is really genius. But I think its success was very much accelerated by being able to go on YouTube and see all these crazy videos of people making these enormous, gorgeous houses and then having them burned down because of an accidental stray torch or something like that. So I think that these things definitely have an impact, direct or indirect. I think, I was trying to remember, Nuclear Throne was developed on stream to a certain degree. That's by Vlambeer, the Dutch developers. And I have to believe it's making its way into AAA as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it absolutely has. I don't know if it's necessarily a daily occurrence, but we talk about it nearly every day. I think the big thing that I would say strategically companies have come to understand, and like Brett said, most games have accidentally happened upon it. Only a few, because it's still really relatively early for fundamentally designing a game around streaming. But the thing that Dan probably already knows is that games are one of the most watched things on the internet now, and the number of hours people spend watching games is surpassing the number of hours they are playing them. And so I think every company, especially AAA, but indies I'm sure as well, are looking at why that is, what that means for what the game is you're making, and how your game should somehow think about that in its design, whether it even just be the core design, but also just in the presentation and the UI shell, you know, like sure. How can that be better integrated? If people do want to watch it, you know, then rather than have them go to Twitch or to YouTube or something, are there things you can do to keep them in the game? You know, so yeah, it's
and that's the continuation of a trend that goes back a couple of generations of consoles, right? Really, when you talk about things like customization, and I'm thinking of Forza as a prime example of this, where you can paint up your car and then be able to share that with friends in your Xbox friends group or what have you. That's another way of taking your own bit of creativity and being able to share it through this medium of this game you love. And I really feel like streaming is just another case of that. It's just
that's fair.
A lot more extended and
yeah. But I think
to a certain extent,
I think people are just thinking a lot more about how to make design decisions that make the game fun to watch, as it is in PUBG or easy to watch as it would be, say, a MOBA. Why MOBAs so far have tended to be better streaming games based on their design, which again, kind of accidental, but easy to follow, few number of characters, top-down view, versus shooters are having real trouble across the board with making that an elegant and fun thing to watch, say on ESPN, because they're just really hard to keep track of.
Right.
Even PUBG, because they did stream their first kind of competitive event at Gamescom, and kind of hard to follow. People don't have. Right. It's fun to watch because of the anecdotal, but
right. I think those tend to be more experiences that people enjoy if they already play them.
Oh yeah.
So if you're already a person who enjoys shooters, but maybe don't have the wherewithal, and I think of teens and younger kids especially, to have the latest shooter all the time, they love to watch the latest Counter-Strike because that's the thing they play, and they'll watch people play Counter-Strike for hours, or watch video clips of this crazy 30 headshot killing spree or whatever. Those sorts of things catch fire with kids in a way, just because they can feel a sort of, it's both aspirational but also some ownership because they also do it. I think that's what happens in shooters because they are so hard to follow.
Yeah, for sure. But my point is kind of like breaking out of just the people who are playing it, right? That's where like football and a lot of people watch football who don't play football on TV.
And it would be impossible to watch football if all you had was a helmet cam.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So, yes, and that's the thing that makes it really difficult with a first-person shooter, is that your internal knowledge of, he's going here because this is this map where I know that there's this cover point and blah, 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 whatever. There's a level of strategy that's going on in the player's head that is not immediately apparent from the first-person view. I think that those can probably work perfectly fine from a third-person view, and I think that that's one of the things that Overwatch has been doing with its play of the game type stuff. And I think they also do something that's individual player-centric, like this was your play of the game type thing, or your moment. I forget what they call them. I have watched a couple streams of that recently, and I think that that's also helpful. The other thing I think that makes this impact development is that I find myself occasionally watching games that I know I will never play.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me. I would never be able to get to the point to be able to be really good at Overwatch and a MOBA and, I don't know, something else. But I can watch a couple of hours of it with pretty highly skilled players and understand it, especially if they're good commentators. So as a developer, it actually helps me to be able to see more games than I'll be able to play in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, it's impacting
it's
us
a
a
frontier
lot of ways.
topic right now.
So, all right, I have the next one. This is from Lucas Rizzoli, whose review on the iTunes store we read twice earlier this year, and he tweaks my nose about that. Anyways, his subject is XCOM, RNG, and luck. Tim and Brett, you've mentioned random numbers, the RNG, and probabilities a few times in your XCOM episodes. I'm curious how you feel about randomness in the experience of XCOM particularly, and in other games generally. What do you think about how and for what randomness is used in a game? What about the player's experience of it? We've actually touched on that a bit this episode, but we can maybe try to recap. Anyway, he says, in XCOM, as in Risk and D&D, attacks are pseudo-random. Every shot is a gamble. In Clay's turn-based stealth tactics game Invisible Ink, as in chess, there are no dice rolls. You carry out an action or not. If you have the action points, you knock out the guard. In Invisible Ink, I felt wholly responsible for my failures. If I lost a unit, it was because of the choices I had made. In XCOM, I'd curse my luck and feel like the game had screwed me by missing a 90% quick shot and rejoice at landing a 15% killing hit. What's funny is that I felt differently about how XCOM and Invisible Ink use randomness to generate levels. Even though I was never certain of the layout until I was playing it and could make things way more difficult, I never felt lucky or responsible in the same way. What do you think about the perception of luck and responsibility in games with very deliberate action? Thanks again for sharing your thoughts and continuing to podcast. Fun to hear about your struggles and successes in XCOM. He says, I bought a copy of XCOM Terror from the Deep at a garage sale when I was 9, and though I was never able to get very far, it really stuck with me. If you read this email on the podcast, be sure to read only once this time. best, Lucas. So we touched a lot on randomness
we've hit some of this
more so than than we had previously in the series. But randomness in games, it's funny because I feel like for me it's very cultural, because really my first experience of games were D&D.
Yeah.
And for me, that's always been part of games. And I do think that had a huge influence on early computer games, as we've talked about time and again, and I don't want to rebeat that drum. But I feel like the early players came to it with the expectation of, oh, it's going to be some dice rolling, whether or not I can see the dice, and I just have to plan around that.
Well, you made a good point. Was it this? I think it was last episode. You occasionally you make a good point, so I'm gonna call this one out for you.
Very kind.
But you made a good point that in D&D there is one, I think I would say one significant difference, and that is there is a DM.
Right.
And there is a analog element to DMing, right, where you can adapt to keep, you're essentially, you are the dynamic difficulty, right? It's like someone makes a bad roll and you don't want it to go down exactly in a tragic way. You as a DM can control that and keep everyone happy and fun. And, and in XCOM, there really isn't that option. I mean, speaking in general, like we've talked about this in the past, before we even started playing XCOM, and you brought up the sort of the WoW example and Sid Meier's example. Like for me, I like RNG, but it is all about perception. I want it to. I like having that success, and then the occasional failure because it makes the success more rewarding. But you don't want it to be actually real. You want it to be kind of that finely balanced, like I said earlier, razor's edge of. You win some, you lose some, but mostly you win some, Right. And I feel like XCOM is taking itself, so far, my perception is that it's taking it very literally on the RNG, and it's accurate, but therefore it's punishing, and we're playing on easy. So,
yes.
And some of that I think is changed with age, in that, I don't want to waste my time as much as I used to. And so when RNG...
You speak to me every week.
Exactly. Yeah, that's part of the worst of it. But when RNG kind of screws you over, you feel like you're wasting your time, or you just end up save scumming, and then you're wasting your own time that way, and then you feel bad about yourself. So.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing a lot of save scumming for XCOM, and I don't feel bad in the least. However,
I've started to, because I don't want, like, I'm growing attached to my soldiers, so.
Oh. I am a little bit. I feel like Sylvia could have done a lot better than Pierre, to be honest. But because he panics. The guy is just, you can't count on him. Anyway.
He has stats, right? Like maybe his...
He probably has stats, but he is the one who has most frequently dropped his weapon. It's like a whole French thing, too. There's this whole thing going on in my head about this.
Aren't you French?
What's that? I am, but that's the whole jokes in the World War II jokes are all about how the French, oh, hey, would you like some French weapons? Only dropped once,
Okay.
It's a whole thing. Anyway, in terms of, he does make some interesting distinctions here between the sort of actions you take versus the random roll of the level layout you get, which I do think is an interesting one, because you had a random roll that you were very happy about a couple episodes back, where you step down the ramp. Oh, actually, maybe you're unhappy and somebody gets shot just stepping out of the ramp.
It was the first move of playing the game.
Your first move playing the game. You just had the worst possible. You rolled a 1 out of 100. You just got the worst possible die roll. But it was a level thing versus a shot percentage thing. It felt like.
Well,
right? You stepped off and it was facing an enemy.
I didn't see the alien. I mean, it was probably both, right? It was like the level layout was the ship landed where it was, and then they also, got a good shot. So
right. So yes, I guess it both worked there. I have felt very lucky at times where I will step I'll take one step. I'm very careful now since that story of stepping one step at a time out of the ship. And just yesterday, I had a moment where I stepped out of the ship, and because I was elevated off the ground, I had a good shot at a second-story window, and was able to take out an alien on the second floor of a building in my first step. And I was like, oh, that felt so good. I didn't feel like I did anything for it. I felt like it was a gimme.
That's how I killed my first Reaper. It was literally right down the ramp, and I just shot.
Right, and I had something similar happen where I accidentally shot a gas tank right next to a Reaper.
And, that's right. That's a good story.
So there's been lots of stuff where good level design in my favor felt really, really good. But again, I agree with Lucas that I don't feel lucky or responsible in the same way as I do when I'm directing.
Yeah, I really want to play.
It is weird that way.
I really want to play Invisible Ink. I've had various people suggested. So after his mail, I'm definitely gonna get it. I think of the two, like I definitely agree with him that I like when I feel more in control of the moment to moment, without the RNG of like the shots and stuff, but that the level design can be programmatic or what have you, or procedural. The truth of the matter is, though, is you really can mess up either. Like the level. It sounds like Invisible Ink maybe has found a good level, procedural level design, setup that they have for their stuff. So it maybe feels fine, but there have been games. I can't think of one that I've in the past that's off the top of my head, but there have been games where it's felt like they just didn't get that right, and it's kind of punishing in the same way that a random shot is punishing, that misses. And I was like, well, this is just really an unfair level makeup. Like I'm in full control, but man, there's no way I'm going to get through this without losing somebody, and there's been times in XCOM, so they kind of have
that can happen in Spelunky.
Oh yeah,
where you can't actually see that the shopkeeper's down below you. You drop a bomb down or whatever, or something just happens and the shopkeeper goes crazy, and you're like, I didn't. What? Yeah. How did it? I had no.
Roguelites are a good example of this whole debate. Yeah,
exactly, and roguelikes are really very much almost the opposite case, right? I mean, Spelunky in particular, which is a game where it's all about the level design being randomized, and you have a certain amount of skill, but it's not percentage based. You have the skill or you don't.
Yeah.
So it is really kind of an interesting flip of the case, and in that case, you often feel like it's your fault.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting counterexample. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, but I appreciate focusing a little spotlight on those questions, Lucas. We'll be sure to read this email again in the future to try to zero in on those.
Yeah, well, we're going to forget it, so we're going to have to reread it.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, let me throw it over to you again. You have the next one from Bjorn.
Okay, Bjorn Johansson, do you think?
Bjorn Johansson.
Subject XCOM accessibility and difficulty. Hello, Swedish friend of the podcast, Bjorn Johansson here. You playing the original XCOM on the podcast was the kick in the butt I needed to finally play through XCOM Enemy Unknown, the reboot by Firaxis. I think a very interesting discussion is the one revolving around accessibility, complexity, and depth. I would define the terms as accessibility meaning designing the game to be easy to get into, with help always guiding the player to be aware of their options and be able to interact with the entire game. Helpful tooltips, good menu design, well thought out player learning progression, etc. Complexity and depth could be described with an example. GTA has depth enough to allow you to steal someone's car, but they have reduced the complexity of actual task itself by making steal car, quote unquote, be one press of a button. If GTA wanted to make more complex, it could have made you manually run alongside the car, assign one button for opening the car door, another for pulling the driver out of the car, a third button to get in, and a fourth button to close the door behind you. This sounds amazing. I want to play this.
It's like Recitar. I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay. The designers were smart enough to understand that the player was interested in the depth and not the complexity of the action. How do you think okay, and so it gets to the question, how do you think the original XCOM and the reboot compare to each other in regards to areas of accessibility, complexity, and depth? From my point of view, as a listener of the podcasts about the original game and the player of the reboot, it seems like the reboot contains a comparable amount of depth, but reduced the complexity and increased accessibility. Love, Bjorn.
Bjorn.
Bjorn. Okay.
Yep.
This is
the complexity and depth example. It's not Recitar. I was confusing it with another game that was around the same time. It was Receiver. This was a game where it was
rings a bell.
It was, I believe, an FPS, but the shooting mechanics to reload the gun were extremely like, okay, I have to slide this. I have to pull this down so that the clip will release. I have to eject the shell, etc. And I don't know what all the steps are. I never played Receiver, but it's meant to be extremely complex in terms of its mechanics around the gun, to kind of remind players that they're not shooting actual guns, and maybe make a political statement to boot.
Yeah,
indie FPS doing that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it was a game jam game even that kind of got fleshed.
You know what? I think it was. That's why I remember it. Yeah. It just kind of reminds me of Surgeon Simulator a little bit too, and that was also a game jam game. And also one weird game that is really close to my heart and mine and Reed's hearts is Trespasser, which is the crazy older, you know what I'm talking about, right? That
I know Trespasser.
Jurassic Park. We played that at the same time back in the day, and have this
would have come out in 2002, 2003, something.
Yeah, it was a game way ahead of its time. It basically was the Far Cry before Far Cry. Like, it just didn't fully realize itself, but it's a really interesting game, and I think influenced a lot of us. But terrible in a lot of ways too, because it was just too complex to do simple things. Is why I brought it up. Like holding your weapon up, and because it was so physics based. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about the balance of these three elements that he's asking about, because I think
I feel like this game really, and all games of its era, so it's not, I'm not picking on XCOM, it really fails in the accessibility department.
Yeah, just
some of that is useful, but some of it is not, right? Just being unable, looking at the icons and going, okay, what do these do again? I forget. And having taken off a couple of weeks to go to Ireland and give a talk and things like that, I came back going, oh man, right.
Yeah.
Let me get the manual, because I can't.
Well, that's what they did. I mean,
know what all the things do.
That's what we all did in this time. Is we just
right, because we couldn't.
The accessibility was just forced into the manual.
I mean, this game actually runs as separate programs. I don't know if you've noticed that. The Geoscape is a program, and then if you actually enter a battle, it runs a different program.
Oh yeah, I'm not
DOSBox
surprised.
actually tells you what's running in the toolbar, and you're running Geoscape when you're in the Geoscape, and you're running Tactical when you're in the, I think you actually run Intro or something at the beginning, because
it's all separate.
That's not important, but they are all separate.
It also doesn't, for me at least, it doesn't.
The Final Fantasy games work as well.
Oh yeah, right. Different engines. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't actually run that well for me, despite its age.
It has started to slow down in some of these bigger bigger battles. Particles have not been great.
Rough,
I think it's emulating the same speed, and it's trying to maintain. Oh, this is the frame rate you would have had. So, so it's trying to hit a target, whatever, and it's running so many instructions per second or whatever have you. There's probably ways to tune that, but I don't care. But yeah, anyway, so. We haven't yet played the reboot, so we will definitely talk about this, Bjorn.
Yeah.
I feel like accessibility is the one thing where the reboot will absolutely excel in. And I wonder if part of the game really is about its complexity and depth. It feels like that's very much what this game is meant to be. It feels like the accessibility is just a technology boundary that hadn't been crossed yet.
Yeah. I mean, it's... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's the genre, right? It's what the genre became. It's the whole point of this genre is that complexity and depth. You know, you want to get into you just want to, like I said earlier, sink your teeth into this kind of game. And with this one, apparently XCOM was where they added in a lot more of the sort of management side of the game that Laser Squad didn't have as much of. I think Laser Squad was just the ground battles. You know, so it's like it adds in another layer of like multiple layers of like researching and all this stuff. And I think that's why people love this genre so much, you know. And then again, Mario Rabbids being yet another more
because
accessible.
it becomes a whole world, right? When you bring in all those other elements, instead of a sort of individual puzzle or individual battle thing, it becomes this whole struggle.
Yeah.
Of humanity versus the aliens, this ancient race, which is a whole nother thing. I don't know if you researched. There was a thing that I researched that told me like, oh, you have to capture an alien captain of some kind to find the base. That was like in a lore dump.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know, right?
You had to research that?
Yeah, I got it out of some research I did. I was like, oh, how about that? And I don't even normally read that stuff, and wow, there it was. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. Yeah. But I do feel like that's critical. That is critical to this genre, and it's interesting in the different ways that that's surfaced. As you pointed out earlier, Civilization and SimCity to a lesser degree, SimCity's kind of in between these games, show more of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And this one definitely a lot is left in your imagination or for you to figure out. And is not directly surfaced to you, and that is not an accessibility issue. It's a deliberate design choice to make some of those things not opaque, not transparent.
Yeah, you could tell they definitely wanted some of that mystery in there, and it creates interesting stories. I mean, that's why I feel like the water cooler stories around this game with friends who loved it back in the day when they played it, you know, were always about like all of those unexpected things that happened that are only going to happen. Those stories are best because of the stuff that's left unpresented to you.
Right.
So you're kind of filling in. It's like, you know, whatever. It's like reading a book. You're filling in. I mean, you're filling in the blanks yourself.
If there was a tech tree for the research and it was just in the manual, that would be a lot less interesting.
Yeah, right.
Granted, you're going to find that you're going to play the game once and you're going to get a sense of it, and you're going to have a strategy, and that's at that point you're trying to beat the designer. But the first time you play it, as we are, that's a really kind of exciting and interesting part of the game to not know. I've actually researched. I've spent research time and money and people or whatever in alien entertainment.
Really?
Yes.
In this game?
In this game. There is a thing on the list, which is alien entertainment. I do not expect it to yield anything interesting in terms of things I can actually use in the battle, but it came up in my topics, and it's because I took down a bigger ship, I think, and took it over and got some alien entertainment. And I saw it in the list of things I got, and I was like, alien entertainment? Huh. Like,
there's a sense of discovery.
Hot sectoid on sectoid action. Wow, cool. I have no idea what that's going to turn out to be, but I couldn't let it go.
Yeah. Huh.
That's why I play a bard. This is the kind of person I am.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway. That sounds like you.
It is.
Yeah, there's just less discovery, right? I'm really interested to know how the modern, how the the reboot handles that kind of stuff, like what the research tech tree is, if there is one, and how much discovery and wonder there is about, and mystery there is about it. Because if they over indexed on accessibility for that game, then it could lose some of that charm. Right. But people say that game is good, so
yeah, it doesn't seem like it has. But then again, a lot of people who are fans of it may have been coming with the original XCOM in mind and already have known that stuff. So it's hard to know. I'm very curious. I really look forward to dipping my toe into that. It's been one I've been meaning to play for a long time and just can't find my way to it. All right, let me tackle the last email here, and then I think we'll call it a night. This one is, will you finish XCOM? Question mark.
Oh, no.
Ooh. Michael So, he says, "Hi, Brett and Tim. I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that you'd be playing XCOM, another one of my all-time favorites, instead of the RPGs you'd originally planned. Given your release schedule, I'm probably sending this email a bit too late, even with your brief hiatus, but I thought I'd send in my feedback anyway. So in case you haven't already had a barrage of emails about this yet, yes, you absolutely do need to reserve time units in order to reaction fire. It's not quite as simple as having the TUs, though, since there are a whole bunch of unit stats that determine whether or not your unit will get the shot off. For the TUs needed to fire in the first place, I seem to remember that is actually a percentage of your total. So even when your units get experience and more TUs, you won't be able to fire significantly more shots, though you'll become more mobile. That's where I got that we discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I remember getting this game in a 2-pack with Syndicate as a teenager. Syndicate was the game I actually wanted, but XCOM, or UFO Enemy Unknown, it was called in the UK, was the game I ended up playing the most. It's a difficult game, even on the easiest setting, and hearing your stories reminds me of how tough it was to figure things out the first time. I suppose the benefit of playing the game when I was younger was that I had plenty of time to experiment and learn what worked and what didn't. Boy, that's a theme that comes up with some of these games. The bit I enjoyed the most was actually the research and learning about background of the aliens and their technology. Even though it served no practical purpose, I researched the flavor items that you find in alien bases and the bigger UFOs to learn more of the lore. I hope that you'll somehow find a way to finish XCOM for the podcast, but I suspect that you won't. Unless you've made a huge amount of progress during your week off recording, you're a long way from the end based on your progress last time. I guess you've still played enough to experience what the game is all about, which is what matters. This email is too long already, so I'll just bullet point a few of the other things I wanted to comment on about your playthrough so far. The power core that you're finding in landed UFOs is the engine. It is fragile and a valuable source of Illyrium. Don't blow it up by accident. Despite what the game indicates about short, yes, no kidding, and long-range detection, you only need a large radar dish and can dismantle the small one once you have a large one. Oh. Perhaps an example of a game indicating that its systems have more depth than they really do. You can rename a lot of things in the game by clicking on their name. For example, you can name your soldiers after people you know, and then you'll feel much worse when they get shot. And he says, I've been trying to figure out which aliens you've been fighting based on your descriptions. I don't think you've encountered a chrysalid yet, and I really want to hear how you deal with it when you do. Looking forward to the next step. Yes, we'll talk about chrysalids next time when I hope Tim has encountered some, and probably some other things that I've encountered that he has not. I did figure out about the Illyrium. I have no idea what it's useful for yet. Probably to power something, I'm guessing. It's basically the dilithium. And that's a good one with the large radar dishes and the small radar dishes.
Yeah, I assume that there's great strategy guides out there that I was contemplating a couple times looking at, but I've prevented myself from. Yeah, and I think he's basically saying, aren't you two just so cute? You're playing along and you think you're making progress, and then the whole world's going to crash. You're just not going to. So I do fear for my progress for sure on based on what where I'm at. So I have some long sessions ahead of me to try to catch up at least.
Ooh, just to catch up with me. My time played is you looked it up, and I was like twice what you've played.
Yeah, you're like 26 hours, and I'm at 13 or 14.
Yeah, that's not good. We'll see how it goes.
Yep. Yeah, it's I'm not surprised that we're getting a lot of mail on this because it's I can see why it grabbed people.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a game that, like many of our games, I feel like I want to spend a lot of time delving into further. With Super Mario last time, I just wanted to dig deeper. I was lucky in playing Final Fantasy IX before that. I actually went deeper into that game than I had gone the first time I had played. And Hitman 2, having played more of the new Hitman, the Hitman 2016, So this podcast has just been great from that standpoint of diving into these things and really digging deep. So each time I feel like I want to dig even deeper.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you feel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an opportunity to. It's basically just kicking me in the butt because I just, I've just life, and this specifically XCOM's a game I've tried to start. I've started it like 3 times, and I haven't, never devoted the time. So
I know it's a tough one. It is tough with our adult schedules and work schedules and life schedules. One other thing that I haven't talked about on the cast thus far is that my next game that I'm going to work on is going to be a sim game.
Oh yeah, that's right. You mentioned, I forgot about that.
Right, I
Yeah.
talked to you about that when I saw you, and so it's really interesting to me to go back and play a game like this.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it is going to come up a lot in discussion about what parts do you want to keep, how
Hmm.
much of the anxiety do you want to have,
Yeah.
and how much of the accessibility do you turn to, and how far on this scale do you go? I mean, there are so many questions that something like this opens up, and it's really exciting to play a game like this. Just I'm about I don't know 6 weeks or so from starting off on that next project, and I'm just a buzz, and part of it is playing this game. So it's
That's
exciting
cool.
times.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good timing.
All right. Well, let's wrap it there as far as mail and feedback goes. We still have a backlog of reviews, and someday I promise you we will get to them. For now, however, we're gonna, I guess, get as far as we possibly can for the next episode. I'd love to finish this game, but
Yeah,
I don't
you.
want to take more than 5 episodes doing it.
No. Well, this is it 5 or will it be
This
6?
this is the 4th episode.
Oh, okay. I thought this was our 5th episode.
No. This is our 4th. We had a week off, but this is our 4th episode. So
Okay.
I think we can try to wrap up as much as we can in the next one. I mean, you should definitely at least get to where I am, where there are more enemy types
Yeah,
and some
yeah.
interesting stuff there for
Yeah, I'll
sure.
put I'll sink some heavy time into it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I will try to do the same. And I think I'd love to be able to finish it, but Michael's email makes me think, how far does this go? Does this go to 2010? We're in 1999. How far does this go? I don't know what year
Right.
this ends in, and I
Right.
don't know. To your point earlier in the episode, I don't know if it's based on how I'm playing, how fast it's feeling it's going, or if it's
Or if it's
it's hard to
predetermined.
it's hard to know. It's really difficult to know. There's two totally different schools of thought as far as that goes, and it's hard to know which one they're part of, and that'd be a great one to ask our guest if and when we have one on this one. So
Hmm.
we are getting that scheduled. So we hope that we'll have a good guest for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Thanks for your email. Again, you can shoot those over to devgameclub@gmail.com. We spend a significant time of each episode, especially with some of these beloved titles, each episode talking about them. You can also review us and rate us on iTunes. That, although we haven't been reading as many reviews lately because there's been emails and the questions and etc., that actually helps us reach new listeners, and that is a terrific thing because it means we can keep doing this every week for all of our advertisers. Oh, right. We're advertising free. Anyway, in the meantime, you can find me at Brett_Duville and him at.
At Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Thanks so much. And of course, you can find the podcast at DevGameClub. We will talk to you next week. And for now, watch the skies and good night.
Good night.